Fell asleep during my lecture today.
All righty, we are live on YouTube. I'll add this in really quick.
Yay.
All righty, if you are watching this at a later date, feel free to fast forward a little bit, maybe about 5 minutes or so.
Yeah.
We are just making sure that everything is functioning right now. So if you're watching this later, hello.
Hey.
We love you all. I am
Let's
looking at
see.
so many screens right now. I've got this one, that one, this one.
I'm facing this one because it's in front of me.
Yeah, it's really confusing.
Of
All righty, we will wait a few more minutes for people to jump on here.
course, no problem. And we're live.
All righty, we are live on Instagram as well. We'll wait just a little bit for some more people to jump on. I have no idea how any of this works.
Yeah, we'll figure it out together.
I guess we will.
I can see me.
Oh, are you on there?
Yeah.
Perfect. All righty. So this is going to be our online Bible study of Genesis chapters 6 through 25. Hello. I can't see who just said hello.
I think it's Sonique.
Oh, Sonique. Wonderful. If you are joining us on Instagram, we are also on YouTube. The audio on YouTube might be a little bit better because it's going through the mics, but you can, of course, watch this again in its entirety on YouTube, and it will also be available on our podcast, which is going to start recording here in a second.
Yeah.
Hello, Nathan. Thank you for joining in. All right. So, my name is Matt, and I'm joined by Divine.
Hey.
I am the pastor of Destiny Youth, and Divine is one of our amazing leaders here. So we are going to start going through Genesis chapter 6 through 25. We have a lot of chapters to get through. So some of the chapters we're actually going to jump past some of the ones where it's like, and so begot so-and-so and blah, blah, blah. But we want you to read all of this later on.
Yeah.
We are just going to hit the imperative stuff and the moments that need to be talked about. So we'll go ahead and start with chapter 6. Chapter 6 is basically talking about the depravity of mankind in this moment after the fall, obviously. So this is talking about corruption. So I'll go ahead and start reading from verse 1 in chapter 6.
Yeah.
And I'm reading from the Amplified. Divine, what do you usually?
I use NIV.
NIV. Perfect. All right. So from the Amplified. Now it happened when men began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God, this is angels, saw that the daughters of men were beautiful and desirable, and they took wives for themselves, whomever they chose and desired. Then the Lord said, my spirit shall not strive and remain with man forever, because he is indeed flesh, sinful, corrupt, given over to sensual appetites. Nevertheless, his days shall be 120 years. There were Nephilim, men of stature, notorious men on the earth in those days. And also afterward, when the sons of God lived with the daughters of men, and they gave birth to their children. So what we're looking at right here with the Nephilim, now there's lots of different things that you can look at biblically as to what the Nephilim were. But basically, the sons of God, these angels, two theories, two possibilities. One is they spiritually entered into these human rulers who partnered with them, and then they started making this new offspring spiritually. The other one is
Mhm.
they took on physical bodies
Yeah.
and then created these Nephilim, or these
Nephilim,
giants.
yeah.
So we'll continue on. It says, the mighty men who were of old, men of renown, great reputation, and fame. And then there's a reference here to Numbers 13:33.
Mhm.
When you go into Numbers 13:33, it talks about the giants that Joshua and the spies
Yeah.
went in and saw, and then they came back and they were afraid. But these giants were descendants of um, a man named Anak, who there's not a whole lot known about him, but Anak was a giant who produced the Anakim people, which were this race of giants, and they were the ones that Joshua and the spies saw. And then, of course, Joshua's army overtook the giants. They killed them. They took their land. And then the only ones who remained were in Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod. And of course, Goliath was from Gath, Goliath and his brothers. So we have the Nephilim. We have man in their depravity, worshiping these fallen angels, worshiping these Nephilim. And I believe, and this is again just theory, but I believe that this is where we get a lot of the mythology of like Zeus, Poseidon, all of these other little g gods. Because when you look at all these other mythologies, Zeus, for instance, in Greek mythology, what does he always do? He comes down to the earth, finds a human woman that he thinks is attractive, has relations with her, and then the person gives birth to this like half god, like Hercules or Perseus or these different things. And I believe in like some of these myths are just a retelling of what actually happened biblically. So then we go into verse 6. It says, the Lord regretted that he had made mankind on the earth, and he was deeply grieved in his heart. So we'll stop there for a second. In the original Hebrew, it doesn't actually, when it says regret, it's not the same as like, oh, I regret my decision of making man. It's actually, what it continues on to say is he was grieved in his heart. So God, he's all knowing. He knew that this would happen. And then it brings up that question of, if God knows
why
that evil is going to happen, why does he create it? And it goes back to free will. The best way I've heard it explained is, if I choose to wake up in the morning and have a bowl of what's a sugary cereal here? Frosties or Fruit Loops, or whatever. Horrible breakfast. God knew that I was going to have that horrible breakfast. But that's my choice. If I wake up and I have eggs and bacon, then that was a good choice. God knew I was going to make that good choice, eating that healthy breakfast. So you don't not have breakfast because you're making a bad breakfast choice. But that's what we see here, is he's grieved at the choice of mankind. And then we go down to verse 8. But Noah found favor and grace in the eyes of the Lord. So Noah kind of comes in out of nowhere. But when you look at the family lineage and everything, you have Enoch all the way down to Methuselah, down to Noah. So Noah comes from this line of people who were with God, like they had a relationship with God. Enoch himself, I think we talked about this last time. If you go into the New Testament, I believe it's in Luke, they talk about how Enoch was taken up to heaven after he was given this revelation from the Lord. So he knew God intimately enough for God to pluck him off the earth, not have him die, and bring him up to heaven. So that's what Noah comes from. And then it says down in verse 9, Noah walked, lived in habitual fellowship with God. So the world is in chaos. The world is in darkness. You
Mhm.
have these Nephilim, demonic beings on the earth.
Yeah.
Some of them are being worshipped by man.
Mhm.
And then there's this, I look at it this way. If the point of these Nephilim or these fallen angels
Mhm.
were to come in and have relations with human women to mess up the genetic code
Mhm.
that God originally intended,
Yeah.
it actually makes total sense because God told Satan,
Mhm.
the seed of this woman
Yeah.
is going to crush your head.
Mhm.
So it would make sense for Satan to say, hey, we need to
Destroy
destroy
the
this
humans.
genetic
Yeah.
like makeup that God has created.
Created. Mhm.
So now we have Noah.
Okay.
Noah walks with the Lord.
Yes, he
What did
does.
you personally pull from this section?
So I highlighted verse 8, but Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. And then that made me think, like, what is favor? Like, why was Noah so different? Why did he stand out? So I think that's a discussion because many people overlook that part. Like, yeah, God chose Noah, but I don't think anyone really understands in the whole world. God saw Noah. Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. So what does that mean? Doesn't mean Noah was perfect. It doesn't mean that Noah was the best of the best, because as we know, the world was corrupt and all have sinned. Everyone from birth is tainted. So what made Noah so different? In my opinion, I think it was his obedience and willingness to listen to God, even amongst everything that was going on around him,
Mm-hmm.
and his refusal to be swayed by the chaos of the world at the time.
Yeah, it's and it says it in the Amplified.
Mm-hmm.
Noah was a righteous man,
Yeah.
one who was just and had right standing with God.
Yeah.
So what does it mean to be in right standing with God? Well, quite literally,
Right
you are
standing.
you are standing
right.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My version says, Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and walked faithfully with God.
Yeah. I would really love to have more information on that
Same.
and exactly what that means,
Yeah.
because and everyone might take a different look at this, but to me, was Noah some sort of hermit? Like just him and his wife by themselves away from everyone else and just, connecting with God. And it says in habitual fellowship with God.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I would just love more
Insight on that.
insight on what his life looks like in his daily life.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, so we'll skip to verse 12.
Yeah.
And then verse 14. Would you read both of those?
Absolutely. So verse 12 says, God saw how corrupt the earth had become, for all the people on the earth had corrupted their ways. And then if we jump down to 14, it says, so make yourself an ark of cypress wood, make rooms in it and coat it with pitch inside and out.
Yeah. So God tells Noah, hey, the earth needs to basically start over. I'm going to destroy it. Go and make this ark. Which in a lot of the kids' storybooks and everything, it's just this massive,
it's a big boat.
canoe-shaped boat. But in actuality, it was described in the same way that you would describe like a chest. So
like
this
a box.
large square box.
Mm-hmm.
But then the fact that God tells him put pitch on it so that it's watertight. And then he goes through, we'll skip over this bit because there's so much to it, but there's full instruction that he gives on how to build it. There's full instruction on where to put the animals, all these different things. And then we come into chapter 7.
Yeah.
And this is where the flood takes place.
Yeah.
So if you would read chapter 7, verse 6
Mm-hmm.
and 11.
6 and 11.
Yeah.
Okay. Chapter 7, verse 6. Noah was 600 years old when the flood waters came onto the earth. Verse 11 says, in the 600th year of Noah's life, on the 17th day of the second month, on that day, all the springs of the great deep burst forth, and the floodgates of heavens were opened.
Yeah. So last time we talked a little bit about this, but I want to go back into it again because
Mhm.
I love this. I love when the Bible proves itself through science.
Yeah.
So in verse 11 in the Amplified, it says, the fountains of the great deep, the subterranean waters burst open,
Mhm.
and the windows and floodgates of heaven were opened. It rained on the earth for 40 days and 40 nights.
Yeah.
So for the longest time, scientists and atheists have said the flood narrative doesn't work because there's not enough water on the earth
Yeah.
for that to happen. Where did all this water come from?
Mhm.
And then in 2014, this company or some people were mining for diamonds, and then they brought up this diamond and they noticed that there were signs of water on this diamond.
Mhm.
So they started drilling deeper, and they found that there is an entire subterranean ocean in the mantle of the earth. So then they started studying this ocean that's in
Yeah.
the mantle of the earth.
Mhm.
And in 2022, they were able to measure how much water was in the mantle.
Yeah.
And for the longest time, it was always the flood narrative doesn't work because you would need 2.5 times more water than the
Mhm.
earth has on it in order to flood it.
Mhm.
There was 3 times more water in the
mantle.
subterranean ocean in the mantle than there was on the face of the earth. So 2022 flood narrative again is proven.
Yeah.
There's also something called the Sumerian king list.
Mhm.
This is archaeological find that dates back to 2100 BC.
Yeah.
And it's basically a list of kings. You can Google this afterward. But in the king's list, it's divided into 2 different lists. One pre-flood,
Mhm.
one post-flood. And then it says in the actual list, whenever it's translated, after the flood had swept over and the kingship had descended from heaven, the kingship was in Kish. So there's this stopping point of the
Mhm.
king's list and then a continuation. And then what else is amazing is it lists the amount of years of these kingships. And just like how the Bible says that the lifespan of man would continue to decrease,
Mhm. It does.
in this king's list, the lifespan decreases.
Yeah.
I think I actually have it here. Yeah, I am not going to get these names right.
You can
But
try.
Juicer, I don't know. 1,200 years. Classina Bell. That sounds like a southern name. Classina Bell. 960 years. Oh, Lord, help me with this one. Nangish Lishma. 670 years. And then there's more. It keeps decreasing.
Mhm.
But we also see this in the Bible with
Correct.
Noah living to
Yeah.
950.
950.
And then by the time we get to Moses, 120.
Mhm.
Exact same pattern with this archaeological find.
Yeah.
So now we'll go with the flood happens, everything's destroyed.
Mhm.
And then we'll go into chapter 8 in a second. But
Can
first,
we really quickly just like
yeah.
go back a little bit
Yes.
to when God is giving Noah instructions with the animals? So one thing we're all taught as kids, Noah put 2 of every animal in the ark.
Mhm.
Rereading this, Noah doesn't put 2 of every animal in the ark. He puts
no.
7 pairs
Yeah.
of clean animals in the ark and
Yeah.
1 pair of unclean. So 7 pairs is 14. So say like a dog was a clean animal, there were like 14 dogs on the ark, not 2.
Yeah. There's a whole list of different
Like, wow.
instructions. Yeah.
And I love how specific God is. There's no confusion. There's no, oh, but God said, crisp, clean, clear. In verse 2, take with you 7 pairs of every kind of clean animal, a male and its mate, a female, and 1 pair of every kind of unclean animal, a male and its mate, a female, and also 7 pairs of every kind of bird,
Mhm.
male and female, to keep their various kinds alive throughout the earth.
Yeah. There's a whole bunch of details because, like, as
Yeah.
a kid, you see, like,
2 by 2.
yeah, 2 little elephants,
Yeah.
and they're holding trunks, like they're holding hands.
Yeah.
Then 2 little lions, and they're like
2
rubbing
giraffes.
faces. Yeah,
Bro,
yeah,
no. So I just thought that was a really interesting find. So let's clear that misconception up. It's not 2 of every animal.
yeah. One thing that I had always had a question about
Mhm.
was, so you have pre-flood,
Yeah.
there's giants, and there's Nephilim.
Yeah.
And then whenever you study other things like the Epic of Gilgamesh and then the Book of Enoch, which I say this all the time, when you
Mhm.
read those things, grain of salt, because it's
Yeah.
not biblically canon,
Yeah.
but there's information there. And it's fun to
Mhm.
just imagine things. But
Yeah. Of course.
we have all of these giants, we have these Nephilim, the
Mhm.
flood happens, everything dies. So then how do we still have giants after the flood?
It's a fair point. Unless they came back down again.
They came back. So I have searched for this answer for a long time.
Yeah.
And what I think it is the bodies died,
Mhm.
but the spirits had to remain.
Mhm.
So you have, that's what's the principalities and powers of the air, is
Yeah.
these spirits that still remained after the flood.
Mhm.
And then going back to how a lot of the things in mythology come about is
Yeah.
there's always this god
Mhm.
that comes down
Yeah.
in order to have relations with a woman. And there's even like in Greek stuff and all these other things,
Yeah.
they bring a virgin to the temple
Yeah.
to offer her to the gods, all these different things.
Mhm.
So when you look at the writings, the fallen angels who first did this,
Mhm.
it says that God punishes them and they're imprisoned.
Mhm.
But then after the flood, you see a lot less of giants, a lot
Yeah.
less of Nephilim.
Mhm.
So it would make sense that God punished the ones who were there,
Mhm.
but then Satan was like, guys, we
Yeah.
still need to do this.
Yeah.
But I imagine it as like these demons and fallen angels are like, man, listen, Lucy.
No, Lucy.
Listen, Lucifer, we don't want to be imprisoned forever.
Yeah.
Like we want to like run around on this earth.
Yeah.
So then you would probably have less of them trying to do this.
Yeah. Okay.
That's just my opinion. But
Yeah.
whether it was physical or spiritual,
Mhm.
they tried to do it again. And then, of course, you have the Israelites, like David, literally hunting down these giants
Yeah.
and killing them,
Mhm.
which we can get to this later. But when David goes and collects the stones from the river, how many does he
Yeah.
get? 5.
5.
I'll put
Oh,
this
did
one
you
up
see
there
that? I should have said that. Yeah, 5.
in the chat. He collects 5 stones.
Yeah.
How many brothers did Goliath have?
5.
Anyone in the chat know? That's a fun little factoid. David grabbed 5, not because, oh, what if I miss? He grabbed
4
5 because
brothers,
he's like,
5
I'm going to go
giants.
kill your brothers after this.
Yeah.
And then they did. Just so awesome.
Sick.
So anyway, we can look, actually, you know what? Hang on. Pull up Jude 1 verse 6.
Jude 1 verse 6 says, and the angels who did not keep their positions of authority
Keep going.
but abandoned their proper dwellings, these he has kept in darkness, bound with everlasting chains for judgment, on the great day.
So there it is.
Yeah.
Jude chapter 1 verse 6 talks about how God locked away these fallen angels.
Yeah.
So one other thing that was interesting, I don't think we read this in the Amplified, but in chapter 6 verse 5, when God is talking about what he saw on the earth, it says, the Lord saw that the wickedness, the depravity of man was great on the earth, and that every imagination or intent of the thoughts of his heart were only evil continually. People think it's bad now, but think about what that world must have looked like when every single imagination, every single thought of their heart was
It's
only
bad.
evil continually. Crazy.
Right.
I don't even want to know what was going on.
Praise God.
Okay, so let's take it from chapter 8, verses 1 and 2.
Okay. Chapter 8, verse 1. But God remembered Noah and all the wild animals and the livestock that were with him in the ark, and he sent a wind over the earth, and the waters receded. Verse 2. Now the springs of the deep and the floodgates of heaven had been closed, and the rain had stopped falling from the sky.
Okay, so the flood is over. Then it says in the Amplified, also the fountains of the deep, so those subterranean waters, were pulled back in.
Yeah.
So that's where all that water went.
Back
Again,
inside.
amazing. Just went back into the mantle of the earth where it is now.
Yeah.
Then we skip down to verse 15.
Yeah.
And God spoke to Noah, saying, go out of the ark, you and your wife and your sons and their wives with you. Bring out with you every living thing from all flesh, birds, animals, every crawling thing that crawls on the earth, that they may breed abundantly on the earth and be fruitful and multiply on the earth.
Yeah.
So here we are seeing the same command that he gave to Adam and Eve.
Yeah.
So now this is the restart of
reset.
everything.
Yeah.
So now we will skip into chapter 9.
Yeah, which is again
And
similar. God is giving him dominion over the
yes.
creatures like he did with Adam.
And this is
Yeah.
I feel like this him saying this to Noah is highly important what I'm about to read, because I think that this is a part of what the world looked like at the time. So it says in verse 6, whoever sheds man's blood unlawfully, by man, judicial government shall his blood be shed. For in the image of God, he made man. As for you, be fruitful and multiply, populate the earth abundantly and multiply in it. So this kind of goes back to Cain.
Yeah.
Killing his brother.
Yeah.
So this world that they lived in, I think this was one of the, because when you think about it, when you have the knowledge of good and evil and you decide what is good and evil, if I want something of yours, it makes total sense for me to just kill you and take it.
Yeah. I guess.
Yeah. Like from that perspective, it's like you have something, I want it. If I kill you, then it becomes mine.
Yeah.
So God is telling him, whoever sheds man's blood unlawfully, like your life is now required.
Yeah.
So I wonder how much of this was happening
before
on the earth of people just murdering each other.
It's crazy.
So then we skip down to 11. God says, I will establish my covenant with you. Never again shall all flesh be cut off by water or a flood, nor will there ever again be a flood to destroy and ruin the earth. And God said, this is the token, visible symbol, memorial of the solemn covenant which I am making between me and you and every living creature that is with you for all future generations. I set my rainbow. So we'll stop there. My rainbow. It is God's. It is his sign. And what was the number one problem with the earth? Murder is one of them, but what was the number one problem? on the earth at this time? Why
Oh,
would-
you asking?
yes, yeah,
My bad. Pride?
pride. Because that was the original sin,
Yeah.
was I don't need you
Yeah.
to tell me what's right and wrong.
Mhm.
I'm going to decide.
Yeah.
I am God. So isn't it interesting how that rainbow flag is associated with pride?
Pride. Mhm.
It's almost this thing of like throwing God's symbol
Back in his
back
face.
into his face
Yeah.
and saying, hey,
Take that.
you made this promise. You wouldn't flood us
Yeah.
again.
Again.
So here's my pride, and it's shoving it back
Yeah,
into
back in
God's
his
face. And then
Yeah.
verse 18, the sons of Noah who came out from the ark were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Ham
Mhm.
would become the father of Canaan.
Hmm.
These are the three sons of Noah, and from these men the whole earth was
Was-
populated.
Mm-hmm.
This is another one of those points that people like to argue, like this can't happen, this doesn't make sense.
Make the whole world.
Yeah.
Wow.
Mathematically, it has actually been calculated. So if you consider a generation to be 25 years,
Okay.
and everyone has a population replacement rate of 1.2.
Okay.
So if I have a rate of within a generation repopulating, making 1.2,
Mm-hmm.
you have 1.2.
Mm-hmm.
If you take that, and then it's 6 people coming off the ark,
Mm-hmm.
and again with a generation being 25 years,
Mm-hmm.
it was 180 generations
Mm-hmm.
between like these 2
Yeah,
points
these
in the
points.
Bible.
Mm-hmm.
So 180 generations, one generation 25 years between 6 people. So you take 6 times the rate, which is 1.2,
Yeah.
to the 180th power,
Mm-hmm.
you end up in a quadrillion.
It's a lot.
So it is extremely possible.
Yeah. Okay.
I know it's true, but mathematically it is extremely possible
Yeah.
for the entire earth to be repopulated just by
Right.
6 people
Yeah.
within the time and the structure.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing from a scientific standpoint is whenever it says that the lifespan would
Mhm.
decrease, when you look at the possibility of reproduction from 6 people,
Yeah.
you can, from a scientific standpoint, argue that through that close breeding,
Mm-hmm.
you would be more susceptible to disease. You would be more susceptible to all these different things like
Yeah.
sickness,
Yeah.
which, if that's a part of the curse, makes sense.
Yeah.
Because if you think about how long these people were living,
Mm-hmm.
you have cell degeneration
Mm-hmm.
and all these different things happening. It makes total sense.
Yeah.
So let's see. We have now the story. We'll just quickly go through it.
Yeah.
Noah gets drunk. Fun times.
Lovely.
So then he goes and he lays in his tent. He's naked, and then his son Ham sees him,
Mm-hmm.
and then it says Ham dishonored him. There's debate as to what that means.
Yeah.
But he dishonors him, and then the other 2 sons cover him up. They're like, no, we're going to protect our father's honor.
Mm-hmm.
So now when Noah wakes up from his drunken stupor, but he knows what happened, he says, cursed be Canaan, the son of Ham, a servant of servants. He shall be to his brothers.
Mm-hmm.
Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant. May God enlarge the land of Japheth, and let him dwell in the tents of Shem, and let Canaan be his servant.
Mm-hmm.
So now we have this curse that happens that God actually ends up honoring later on.
Yeah.
Which is a really interesting thing to look at.
Yeah.
So then we have in chapter 10, the descendants of Noah. And then you can go and read that for yourself.
Yeah.
But there is one thing to point out in verse 8. Cush became the father of Nimrod. He became a mighty one on the earth.
Yeah.
He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore it said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord.
Mhm.
The beginning of his kingdom was Babel, and Erech, and Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar in Babylonia.
Mm.
So, again, unless you're looking at the epics of Gilgamesh, there's not a whole lot
Yeah.
on this guy, but we do know he was involved in Babel, in the early stages
Yeah.
of Babylon, all these different things.
Mhm.
So before we go into the Tower of Babel,
Mm.
anything that you want to discuss or add, or if there's a question, sorry, I'm
Yeah.
having to look at two
Yeah,
chats.
I was gonna say there's probably questions on the chat. I'll wait for the questions first before I bring anything else up.
I don't see anything other than from my wife that says, can you imagine how big Noah's nose must have been by the end? I think by that she means when you're old, your nose continues to grow.
Yeah.
I don't know.
950. That's a really long time.
Be like Pinocchio up in there.
Stop.
But yeah, anything from you, anything that you noticed or want to talk over?
What chapter are we on? Are we
We're-
just talking about like what we've been through so far?
Yeah, anything
Okay.
from like 9 and 10.
Oh, from 9 and 10.
Yeah, flood, post flood.
Okay, so I'd highlighted something flood. When Noah entered the ark, it actually says in verse, what verse is it? That God, verse 16 of chapter 7. Sorry, I went really far back. The Lord shut him in.
Yes.
I love that. God really said, nope, shut it. So even if Noah was, sympathetic towards other people and wanted to let them in the ark, God had quite literally just like, nope.
Yeah.
He did not have a choice in that matter. Because I know many people say, oh, if Noah was so great that God said he was righteous, why didn't he just like have mercy and let people on the ark? He couldn't. He didn't have a choice. And that's one thing
and
I
he
love
tried
about
to tell
God.
them.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing is God is so patient.
Merciful, yes.
And Noah tried to warn everyone.
Mm-hmm.
No one would listen. They mocked him. They
did.
like all these different things.
Mm-hmm.
And even if when it started raining and the water started rising, it was too late. And if God hadn't have, me personally, and in my personality, it starts raining and people are like, let us on. I'd be like,
no,
nah.
We know. Don't worry. We know.
I hope you know how to surf. Have fun.
Hope you can swim.
But Noah could have had felt pity. And realistically, like if I had seen children or something, like that would have been absolutely hard. And it was hard for God.
I can imagine.
Like it grieved God so much. One day in one of my daily encounters, I was asking the Lord, I was like, I love the judgment and the justice and everything. I love that about God.
Mm.
I also love his love and mercy and just how loving he is.
Mm-hmm.
And one day I was just like, God, like this moment in the flood, what were you feeling?
Yeah.
And sometimes, because I'm not an emotional person, but sometimes he shares a little like sliver of emotion.
Mm-hmm.
And in that moment, I still have not had a moment like this ever.
Yeah.
I felt so much emotion come into my spirit of extreme grief, yet still extreme love, because it was loving for him to save Noah and his family and give everything this chance to restart. But at the same time, it so grieved him that he had to do it. And I was so overcome by it that I couldn't help. I just cried.
Yeah.
I didn't know what to do with this emotion.
Yeah.
And sometimes we have this personified version of God that's just this stoic,
emotionless,
bearded man up in the sky that's just like, whatever. But no, he has emotion, and he grieved this moment.
I see a question.
Yes. Victoria says, Divine, Can you get more into what favor means? How do we find favor?
Okay. Favor. Okay, hold on. Let me actually get the dictionary definition of what favor is. Okay, so according to the dictionary, favor means approval, support, or liking for someone or something. I feel like that feels very light. Like it doesn't give the depth we need to really understand what it means to find favor with God. I mean, yeah, you find favor with people like, oh yeah, I like you, you have my favor. But what we need to remember is like with God, there's so much more depth to it. It has a lot more of a meaning, a lot more power behind it than just, oh yeah, I like you, Noah, so I'm gonna save you over everyone else. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna chapter 8 of Genesis, verse 20. Then Noah built an altar to the Lord. He sacrificed burnt offerings to it. So Noah gave thanks to God after everything. Let's think about this honestly. People who were killing each other and doing all those, do you really think after God saves them for a flood, they're going to build an altar and then give up a sacrifice to Him? I think in something like that, that's a very good example of how Noah was probably different to the people of his time, which gives you an insight into why he probably found favor in the eyes of God. He was grateful and he understood the significance of God and how God is above himself and everyone else in the world at the time. So yeah, how do we find favor? To be honest, I don't think there's an exact answer, but from what we've read so far and what we're going to read from like Noah and Abraham, it seems like obedience is probably one of the easiest, or should I say best ways to find favor with God. Noah was obedient, and he found favor in the sight of God. So
Yeah. Obedience. And then I would say it always mentions that he walked with God. He was continually in the presence of God. And that's where, a lot of this favor comes from. And the Hebrew word for favor, when you look at it, is hesed, which can mean a number of different things. But just to hit on a couple of them, one is mercy.
Yeah.
So Noah was still a sinner. He had sin in his life, but God showed him mercy because he knew God. And how many times have we been shown mercy? Number one, when we've known God, or when we haven't even known God.
Yeah.
And again, it goes back to how patient God is with us. But yeah, good take on that. I hope that answers that question.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're moving into chapter 11.
Okay.
We come into the building of the Tower of Babel, and we have Nimrod. So when we look at this story, like from the standpoint of what's happening, is men start to gather in large cities after this repopulation happens. And of course, Nimrod is, I love that name, Nimrod. You Nimrod. I think the name Nimrod actually means rebellious one, if I'm not mistaken. But people like Nimrod gain followings.
Yeah.
So now we have this city, and if you want to start reading in chapter 11, just go, and then we'll stop when we come to something that we want to hit on.
Okay, no problem. So chapter 11, verse 1. Now the whole world had one language and a common speech. As people moved eastward, they found a plain in Shinar and settled there. They said to each other, "Come, let's make bricks and bake them thoroughly." They used bricks instead of stone and tar for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth." But the Lord came down to see the city and the tower the people were building. The Lord said, if as one people speaking the same language they have begun to do this, then nothing they plan to do will be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and confuse their language so they will not understand each other.
And stop right there. So they get together. Number one, God doesn't have a problem with buildings and structures. It's not like he's like, you built something, how dare you? But it's the heart behind it.
Yeah.
Which is, let us make a name for ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
This city will be ours and will be famous. So again, this is from the standpoint of pride.
Yeah.
So looking at this, Babylon, this is early Babylonian stuff.
Yeah.
If we go into Isaiah 14, in verse 12, this is talking to Babylonian rulers, which you could argue this is being, this is going to King Nebuchadnezzar II.
Mm-hmm.
But also it is a description of Lucifer and what he did.
Yeah.
And so if you read this through that concept of course, Lucifer's sin was pride, and looking at this again, and the mention of Babylon, you can also apply it to Nimrod. So I'll start reading in verse 12.
Yeah.
How you have fallen from heaven, O star of the morning, light bringer, son of the dawn, Lucifer. You have been cut down to the ground. You who have weakened the nations, king of Babylon. But you said in your heart, I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God. I will sit on the mount of assembly in the remote parts of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will make myself like the Most High. So that right there, I will make myself like the Most High. It goes back to the garden. You'll be just like God.
Yeah.
But in fact, you will be brought down to Sheol, to the remote recesses of the pit, the region of the dead. Those who see you will gaze at you. They will consider you, saying, is this the man who made the earth tremble, who shook kingdoms, who made the world like a wilderness and overthrew its cities, who did not permit his prisoners to return home? So that right there automatically tells you, like, it's not the building.
No.
It is the spirit behind it. Because just like how you have Lucifer, Satan, with his pride trying to put himself above God. You have this now happening with Nimrod and the Tower of Babel.
Yeah.
And it is still satanic activity because it's pride.
Yeah.
And then when God says this will only be the beginning
of
what they will do in their rebellion against me. This is again God showing his mercy to mankind by saying, I'm going to scatter them so that they don't complete this. What?
Instead of just killing them.
Instead of just, yeah. Man, y'all out there, you should be so glad I am not God. Because listen, if I saw them starting to do this and like, we're going to be better than God. Okay. Yeah, I promised no water, but guess what? Everyone's getting hit by lightning. We're done here.
It's true. Do you know what? I actually meant to mention that. I love how God is very specific with it. He said, I will never end the earth with a flood.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean he can raise fire from the ground.
And then in Revelation, it's like, and the earth will be destroyed by fire. Okay, great. So not water.
No water, but fire. Yeah. Love that.
Yeah. So could you imagine this though? Imagine you and your friend are working on this building together.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden your friend just starts speaking Japanese. Imagine the confusion.
Yeah.
The pure chaos of the moment.
Yeah.
Where it's just, hey, Tim, hand me that hammer. And then just, I'm so sorry. Yeah. I don't know Japanese enough. Japanese is just a language that popped up in my head, but
that was Spanish. That's one of the only other languages I can probably speak. But
so they have their languages mixed up, and I don't know if one of them was even Japanese. It's probably not. It's
probably one of the ancient languages, you know, like
super
Arabic,
old.
Hebrew, something like really, really old.
So They're scattered.
Yes.
Now we have a little bit in verse 10 about the descendants of Shem.
Yeah.
These are the records of the generations of Shem, from
Mhm.
whom Abraham descended. So
Yeah.
if we go back to that curse,
Yeah.
it says, "Blessed be the Lord, the God of Shem."
Yeah.
So now Abraham
Abraham.
is a descendant of Shem.
Yeah. Or Abraham.
Shem was 100 years old when he became the father of some of these names.
Arphaxad.
Yeah.
It looks like
Arphaxad.
Arphaxad.
Sounds like
It's
an
okay.
Italian dish.
It's okay.
Arphaxad. It says 2 years
Sure.
after the flood. So we know that Abraham is coming from the descendants of Shem.
Yeah.
Now we skip over to verse 27. Now these are all the records of the descendants of Terah. Terah was the father of Abram,
Abraham,
Nahor, and Haran was the father of Lot.
Yeah.
So now we're coming
Abraham's
into the
nephew.
story of Abraham and Lot.
Mm.
So they're in the land of Ur, which is the Chaldeans.
Yep.
Now here we have Abraham and Nahor took wives for themselves. The name of Abraham's wife was Sarai, later called Sarah.
Sarah, yeah.
We don't need to know about Nahor that much.
Mm-hmm.
Now we'll skip down to verse 30. But Sarai was barren, and she did not have a child.
Mm-hmm.
Terah took Abram, his son, and Lot, the son of Haran, his grandson, and Sarai, his daughter-in-law, his son Abram's wife, and they went out together to go from Ur of the Chaldeans into the land of Canaan. But when they came to Haran, about 550 miles northwest of Ur, they settled there.
Mm.
So we get kind of this little picture into this family and their movement, and we could go into all of their movements and everything, but it's more important that we get to the covenant and this plan that God has with Abram or Abraham.
Mm.
So I'm going to read this one part
Okay.
in chapter 12, verse 1, but then I'd like for you to read from 2 and 3.
Of course.
So now in Haran, the Lord said to Abram, "Go away from your country and your relatives." Verse 2.
Verse 2. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all people on earth will be blessed through you.
Okay. So then Abraham departs. I'm going to paraphrase this because we still have a lot to get through.
Yeah.
So he leaves Haran.
Mm-hmm.
Then here in verse 7, then the Lord appeared to Abram and said, "I will give you this land to your descendants."
Mm-hmm.
So he is near, basically there's Canaanites here. So this is the land that he is promising Abram. So Abram built an altar there to honor the Lord who had appeared to him.
Mm-hmm.
Then he moved on from there to the mountains on the east of Bethel and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. And there he built an altar to the Lord and called on the name of the Lord in worship through prayer, praise, and thanksgiving. Again, going back to thanksgiving. They are always giving thanks to God. Then Abram journeyed on, continuing toward Negev, the south country of Judah. So now we're going to skip. There's this whole them going to Egypt. There's a war of the kings. There's Melchizedek.
Mm-hmm.
That is something for you guys to read on your own. We want to skip toward Abraham has promised a son in chapter 15. So, Divine, would you read verse 1 in chapter 15?
Chapter 15, verse 1. After this, the word of the Lord came to Abram in a vision. Do not be afraid, Abram. I am your shield, your very great reward.
So then Abram replies, "What reward will you give me, for I am leaving this world childless? Who will be the owner and heir of my house? Since you have given me no child," I'm paraphrasing here. Since you have given me no child, a servant born in my house will be the heir.
Mm-hmm.
So now God brings Abram outside and he
Mhm.
says, look toward the heavens, count the stars if you're able to count them.
Mhm.
So I love God. Like, God leads him outside and he's like, hey, bro, count the stars if you're able to. I know how many there are.
Yeah.
Just like, sometimes the flex that God has is just
Mhm.
awesome. He says, count the stars if you can count them. He says, so numerous shall your descendants be. Then Abram believed and affirmed and trusted and relied on, remained steadfast to the Lord. Then he said, I am the same Lord who brought you out of Ur of the Chaldeans to give you this land as your inheritance. So now we're going into this
Yeah.
covenant portion. So God tells him, bring me a 3-year-old heifer, a 3-year-old female goat, 3-year-old ram, a
Yeah.
turtle dove, and a young pigeon. So he goes and gets them. They're cut down the middle, and then the halves of the animals are laying opposite to each other.
Yeah.
So what this was there was a blood trail between these severed bodies. So later on with the Hebrews, when you made a covenant with another tribe, you would go through this same process. And basically what this was is it's saying, I am making this agreement with you, this unbreakable agreement.
Yeah.
And if I break that agreement, may this same thing that happened to these animals happen to me.
Yeah.
So you're basically making this promise and saying, if I break this, I will die.
Mm-hmm.
So he makes this covenant with God.
Mm-hmm.
And God says to Abraham, know for sure that your descendants will be strangers living temporarily in a land, which is where?
Canaan?
No, this
Where
is the
am
one
I?
where they're going to be, because you pointed out.
The Israelites. Sorry,
Yes.
I'm so sorry. I lost my. Yeah, the Israelites in Egypt.
Yes.
Yes.
So God is already telling him about what's going to happen with Egypt, which
Yeah.
is crazy. But there they will be enslaved and oppressed for 400 years.
Yeah.
But on that nation whom your descendants will serve, I will bring judgment, and afterward they will come out of that land with great possessions. As
Mhm.
for you, you shall die and go to your fathers in
Oh.
peace, which is actually a great promise. Like, you'll die in peace.
Yeah.
Great, cool.
Mhm.
You shall be buried at a good old age. Then in the fourth
Mhm.
generation, your descendants shall return here to Canaan, the land of promise. For the wickedness and the guilt of the Amorites is not yet complete, not yet finished. When the sun had gone down and a deep darkness had come, there appeared a smoking, brazier-like flaming torch, which passed between the divided pieces of the animals. On the same day, the Lord made a covenant, a promise, a pledge with Abram, saying, to your descendants I have given this land, from the river of Egypt to the great river Euphrates, the land of the Kenites and the Kenizzites and the Cadmonites and the Hittites and the Perizzites and the Rephaim,
Yeah.
the Amorites, Canaanites, all the ites.
Yeah.
So there is the covenant that God makes
Yeah.
with Abram. This is going to be yours. The funny thing is, God will always keep his promise.
Of course.
We can never keep our promise.
True.
We fail all the
All the
time.
time.
And again, this is how good God is. Even though we break our promise to God,
Mm-hmm.
we don't end up like those split in half animals.
Yeah.
Because he's
Thankfully.
merciful.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so now we have this promise of children.
Yeah.
But we have Sarai, Abraham's wife,
Mm-hmm.
who has her own little idea of how to come up with this. So, chapter 16.
Verse 1. Now Sarai, Abram's wife, had borne him no children, but she had an Egyptian slave named Hagar. So she said to Abram, the Lord has kept me from having children. Go, sleep with my slave. Perhaps I can build a family through her. Abram agreed to what Sarai said. So after Abram had been living in Canaan 10 years, Sarai, his wife, took her Egyptian slave Hagar and gave her to her husband to be his wife.
Right there. So they had this promise.
Mm-hmm.
Sarah decides to take matters into her own hands because she's not seeing that promise yet fulfilled.
Yeah.
And then she says, I'm asking you to go to the bed of my maid so that she may bear you a child. Perhaps I will obtain children by her.
Mm-hmm.
So if God's not going to do it, I'm going to do it my way. Which, again, back to the beginning.
See how that worked out.
So we know how the story goes.
Mm-hmm.
She gets pregnant.
Yeah.
And then Sarai starts treating her poorly. It says, so Sarai treated her harshly and humiliated her, and Hagar fled from her. So Hagar runs away. And then it says, but the angel of the Lord found her by a spring of water in the wilderness on the road to Egypt by way of Shur. And he said, Hagar, Sarai's maid, where did you come from? And where are you going? And then she explains it, but then he says, go back to your mistress and submit humbly to her authority. Then the angel of the Lord said to her, I will greatly multiply your descendants so that they will be too many to count. Then he gives her other promises, but one in particular, because the Lord has heard and paid attention to your persecution, your suffering. He, Ishmael, the son, will be a wild donkey of a man, which is not an insult.
Even though it sounds like one.
Yeah. His hand will be against every man continually fighting, and every man's hand against him. And he will dwell in defiance of all his brothers.
Mm.
Then she called the name of the Lord who spoke to her. You are God who sees. For she said, have I not even here in the wilderness remained alive after seeing him who sees me with understanding and compassion? This is one of the most important stories in Genesis that just gets looked over all the time. This woman sees God. I think it was actually Jesus.
Yeah.
But she sees him. Other people who have seen God, seen Jesus, are like Moses.
Yeah.
Like, the top dogs of of this story. But here is Hagar, who's an Egyptian, who's a slave girl, and she sees him. Incredible. Therefore, the well where she was at was called Bir Lahai Roi, well of the living one who sees me. It is between Kadesh and Bered. So Hagar gave birth to Abram's son, and Abram named his son, to whom Hagar gave birth, Ishmael, God hears.
Okay.
So we have Ishmael, the first son, which was not the one that God had promised. It was not the intent, but still, here we are, human beings taking it into our own hands.
Great.
So then we have the covenant of circumcision. We'll skip that one. Read about it later. But we come to 18, and now we have the birth of Isaac promised. So if you would take it, 18 verse 2. 18 verse 2.
Abraham looked up and saw 3 men standing nearby. When he saw them, he hurried from the entrance of his tent to meet them and bowed low to the ground. He said, if I have found favor in your eyes, my Lord, do not pass your servant by. Let a little water be brought, and then you may all wash your feet and rest under this tree.
Okay, so he sees these 3 men, recognizes that one of them is God or Jesus. The other 2 are angels, which we'll see that they are angels later on in the story.
Wait, quick point. His name is changed now.
Yes.
He's now
Abram
Abraham.
is now Abraham.
Yeah.
So God and these 2 angels come. He recognizes it is God. He brings them in.
Yeah.
They start talking. And then in verse 10, it says, He said, I will surely return to you at this time next year, and behold, Sarah, your wife, will have a son. And Sarah was listening at the tent door, which was behind him. Now Abraham and Sarah were old, well advanced in years.
Mhm.
She was past the age of childbearing. So Sarah laughed to herself when she heard the Lord's words, saying, After I have become old, shall I have pleasure and delight, my Lord, husband, being also so old? And the Lord asked Abraham, Why did Sarah laugh to herself, saying, Shall I really give birth to a child when I'm so old? Is anything too difficult or too wonderful for the Lord? At the appointed time, when the season for her delivery comes, I will return to you, and Sarah will have a son. So there we have the promise. Sarah denies the fact that she laughed,
Yeah.
which is funny. So it's like, and he, the Lord, said, No, but you did laugh. Hilarious. So they're told this, and then they go outside, and now in verse 23, Abraham approached the Lord and said, Will you really sweep away the righteous, those who do right, with the wicked, those who do evil? So now we skipped a little ahead. God is now speaking with Abraham about Sodom and Gomorrah, these evil cities.
Yeah.
But then Abraham is a little bit concerned.
Mhm.
The other two men, and it says, Now the two men, angelic beings, turned away and went towards Sodom. So we're going to see what they're doing a little bit later. But now Abraham is having this conversation with God. We'll skip through it, but Abraham says, Suppose there are 50 righteous people within the city. Will you really sweep it away and not spare it for the sake of the 50 righteous who are in it? And then he goes, Actually, suppose there's not 50, 20. Well, hang on, God. What if there's 10? And he just keeps lowering the number. It's like, okay, hang on. 10. What if there's 10 righteous people in the city?
Do you know how much favor you have to have with God to be able to just be like, actually,
Yeah.
let's go lower?
Yeah.
From
Listen,
50 to 10. That
Yeah.
is like 5 times
Yeah.
less the amount of people God was asking for. Do you know how much favor Abraham must have had? I was speaking with
Exactly.
Gospel about this. Like, it's actually crazy. You're speaking to God.
Yeah.
You know, the guy who wiped out the whole earth and then put Noah into. And you're like, God, let's not say 50, 45.
Yeah.
All the way down to 10. Like, you're bargaining with him and he's actually listening to you.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
When you read this from the context of fatherhood,
Yeah.
it changes your whole entire outlook on everything. Because now when
Yeah.
I read this as a father,
Mhm.
like before I was a father, it was like, why is God listening to this dude? It's like, bro, he's planning on wiping it out. Let
Yeah.
him do it. But
Mhm.
now reading it as a father, it reminds me of the conversations and the bartering that I do with my kids. It's like, Dad, if I clean my room, could I have one piece of candy? Sure.
Sure.
If I clean my room, can I have 2 pieces? Just continues on. And it's like,
Yeah.
it's cute because it's your
Your
kid.
child, yeah.
And it's the same thing here where Abraham's just like, okay, what if 10 people, 10 people, will you spare it? And God's just like,
Sure.
yeah. So then chapter 19, and I'm aware of the time and we still have to get to 25.
Yeah.
But in chapter 19, we have the doom of Sodom.
Mhm.
So we see in verse 12, the two men, the angels, they find Lot,
Mhm.
who's a relative of Abraham.
Mhm.
And they say, have you any others here in Sodom, a son-in-law, and your sons and your daughters, whoever you have in the city, take them out of here, for we are destroying this place, because the outcry for judgment against them has grown so great before the Lord that the Lord has sent us to destroy and ruin it.
Mm.
So then Lot goes out, talks to some people, but they all thought he was joking. So then Lot goes, and it says here in verse 16, but Lot hesitated and lingered. The men took hold of his hand and the hand of his wife and the hands of his 2 daughters, because the Lord was merciful to him for Abraham's
Right.
sake.
Yeah.
Again, it goes back to the amount of favor that Abraham had with God.
Yeah.
So these angels grab them and they're like, we are getting out of here.
Yeah.
And they brought them out and left him outside the city with his family. We do have a comment here. Victoria says, I actually wonder if God led Abraham on in the conversation, because he says to himself, should I tell Abraham what I'm about to do? What if God wanted Abraham to intercede? That's actually a good point, because he does the same thing with Moses.
Yeah.
There are points where, like, you might feel a burden to pray for somebody or an area, and it could very well be that the Lord is actually like, hey, I want you to intercede for that nation. I want you to intercede for that person. It could be this is what I've thought before. I've thought of somebody that I don't necessarily like. It's like, I love you because I kind of have to, you know, but it's like, I don't like you. I don't want to be around you.
Yeah.
God, as a person, we just don't
get along,
you know, but then there will all of a sudden be this thing of like, I need to pray for that person. That doesn't come from me. I know it doesn't come from me.
Of course.
But when it comes from him, it's like, hey, I'm giving you this opportunity to intercede.
Okay.
Even though you may not feel like it, you may not like this person, I want you to intercede.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then they're brought out. Then if we skip to verse 26, this of course is the part where his wife gets blown away.
Yeah.
But Lot's wife, from behind him, foolishly, longingly, looked back towards Sodom in an act of disobedience, because the angel said, go, walk away, do not look back. Do not long for that place that you are being pulled out from. And she became a pillar of salt. So as a kid listening to this, I was always like, so was it just like some sort of like Harry Potter spell where she just boom, salt? But what's interesting is when she looked back, it was like fire and brimstone, all these different things happening. So her dead body, actually, it's very likely that she became encrusted with salt because this disaster occurred in a salt-rich area next to the Dead Sea. So it could be that during this disaster, the amount of salt that was in the air just caused her to crust over with salt.
Oh, lovely.
Super fun.
Fun. I just also want to highlight this part, and my version doesn't say it, but when you were reading it, it said Lot's wife looked back longingly.
Yes.
Because I feel like many people read it and they think, oh, she just did a quick double back and then it just became salt. She looked back longingly, as in she felt like she was leaving something behind, something that was worth taking with her. And I think that is why she wasn't punished, but that is why she became salt. Because why are you desiring what you're being saved from? Type of thing. So just wanted to point that out.
Yeah. And when you look at it, it might seem mean, because that's what I always thought as a kid was like, oh, God turned her into salt.
Because she did a little double back. Like I would too, if there's fire and brimstone behind me and I'm running, I'm just trying to make sure I'm not gonna get hit. But it wasn't a case of, oh, she looked back longingly, like, oh my God. Yeah.
Well, if you look at verse 16 again, but Lot hesitated and lingered. If you apply that to Lot's wife, because if I'm like running with my kids away from a burning, exploding city, number one, I want to see the explosion. But number two is like, I'm also going to like look behind and check on my kids and everything.
Of course.
So it wasn't like you said this, oh, let me check on things. Oh, salt.
Yeah, no.
I think she looked back longingly, of course, but then lingered.
Yeah.
I think there could have been a moment where she like stopped running
and just
like looked back and then
salt. Victoria said she's salty.
Salty. Salt
Yeah.
Bay. So she is hit with the brimstone, whatever.
Yeah.
Body's crusted over by salt.
Mm-hmm.
Then in verse 27, Abraham started out early the next morning to the place where he only the day before had stood before the Lord, and he looked down toward Sodom and Gomorrah and toward all the land of the valley of the Dead Sea. There it is.
Mm-hmm.
And he saw, and behold, the smoke of the land went up like the smoke of a kiln, a pottery furnace.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the destruction of those cities.
Yeah.
Anything to add to that?
I think first I'm gonna say it's so crazy how quickly things can change, because like here it says early the next morning Abraham got up and returned to the place where he stood before the Lord. So like literally just yesterday he was there looking over a great city where everything was lively
Happening.
yeah, and literally like 24 hours later it's just smoke and
Yeah.
fire. Like it's crazy.
Yeah.
God does not play around.
Do not linger,
No.
and do not look back at where he has pulled you from,
Yeah.
because it will lead to destruction. That's another
Yes.
takeaway from that. And you'll be salty.
Yeah. Don't learn the hard way. Just listen.
So we're still in chapter 21. And I just want to hit on a couple of things in here. In verse 32, we have Lot.
Mm-hmm.
They escape. He's with his daughters. And this behavior that we're about to read is the byproduct of the place that they were in. And it's sick.
Mm-hmm.
So the daughters are with Lot.
I think it's chapter 19, not 21.
Sorry, yes. Chapter 19, verse 32.
Yeah.
They say, oh, our dad's not going to have any offspring. He's not going to have any children. This city was destroyed, blah, blah, blah. And then here we go, verse 32. Come, let us make our father drunk with wine, and we will lie with him, so that we may preserve our family through our father.
Yeah, silence is loud.
Yeah. So you look at this and initially it's like, oh my gosh, disgusting, which, yeah, it is.
Yes.
But we actually see this comparison, and I just figured this out now. We see this same thing happening with Sarah.
Yeah.
Earlier.
Taking matters into your own hands.
Instead of just waiting.
Yeah.
And being like, well, hang on. Maybe he'll meet somebody. We'll meet men, whatever.
No.
Instead, they decide to go forward with this. So they get their father drunk. One goes in, does the deed with dad.
That's crazy.
The next day they do it again. Then in 36, thus both the daughters of Lot conceived by their father. The firstborn gave birth to a son and named him Moab, which means from father. He is the father of the Moabites to this day. So if we skip forward to Judges, the Israelites have all these problems from the Moabites.
Yeah.
Anytime that somebody decides to take matters into their own hands, there's always fallout that happens because of it.
Yeah.
So now one son leads to the Moabites. The younger sister also gave birth to a son and named him Ben-Ami, son of my people. He is the father of the Ammonites to this day. Again, another tribe who were constantly oppressing the Israelites.
It's kind of like it comes back to bite them in the backside.
Yeah, there's plenty of times where
if
that's
it isn't
happened.
the consequences of my own actions.
That's exactly what it is. It's like punching yourself, and then the next day,
Like
your jaw is sore.
Like,
it's like,
oh
God, why did you do this to me? It's like, I didn't. You did this.
Crazy.
So then in verse 20, we have this moment with Abimelech and Abraham, and then he deceives him, all these different things.
Yeah.
We'll skip over that one, read that one for yourselves. Now, if we go to chapter 21, we have Isaac being born. So chapter
Finally.
21, verses 1 through 3.
Verse 1. Now the Lord was gracious to Sarah as he said, and the Lord did for Sarah what he had promised. Sarah became pregnant and bore a son to Abraham in his old age, at the very time God had promised him. Abraham gave the name Isaac to the son Sarah bore him. When his son Isaac was 8 days old, Abraham circumcised him as God commanded him. Abraham was 100 years old when his son Isaac was born unto him. Sarah said, God has brought me laughter, and everyone who hears about this will laugh with me. And she said, who would have said to Abraham that Sarah would nurse children? Yet I have borne him a son in his old age.
Right. So now we see God's promise being fulfilled
25 years later,
Yeah.
if I may add.
in something that she laughed at. And now she's like, God has brought me laughter. It's like, yeah,
Lovely.
eat your words.
Literally.
So now we have verse 9, and we're starting to see a little bit of foreshadowing of what's going to happen in
Yeah.
the future. Now, as time went on, Sarah saw Ishmael, the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, whom she had borne to Abraham, mocking Isaac. Therefore she said to Abraham, drive out this maid and her son, for the son of this maid shall not be an heir with my son Isaac. The situation distressed Abraham greatly because of his son Ishmael, as it would. God said to Abraham, do not let it distress you because of Ishmael and your maid. Whatever Sarah tells you, listen to her and do what she asks, for your descendants will be named through Isaac. And I will also make a nation of Ishmael. So this is what's great. Again, a mistake that Abraham made was actually like Ishmael.
Yeah.
God loved Ishmael still.
Yeah.
So even though Abraham made this mistake and Sarah made this mistake, God still says, I will make a nation of Ishmael, the son of the maid, because he is your descendant.
Yeah.
So Abraham got up early in the morning and took bread and a skin of water and gave them to Hagar, putting them on her shoulder, and gave her the boy and sent her away. So now she leaves with Ishmael.
Yeah.
And then we have this other moment, skipping to verse 18, with God and Hagar in the desert. She basically puts her son in this bush and then says, we're going to die, but God, please don't let me witness him die. So then he says to her, get up, help the boy up, and hold him by the hand, for I will make him a great nation. Then God opened her eyes, and she saw a well of water, and she went and filled the empty skin with water and gave the boy a drink. God was with Ishmael, and he grew and developed, and he lived in the wilderness and became an expert archer. He lived in the wilderness of Paran, and his mother took a wife for him from the land of Egypt. And of course, this descendant, Ishmael, is what leads to Islam eventually. So still from that line of Abraham, but there's a very clear divide between the faith of Islam and the faith of the Hebrews.
Yeah.
So then there's a covenant made with Abimelech. We'll skip over that. So now in chapter 22, we come to the story that most people know, which is the offering of Isaac.
Yeah.
So read 22 verses 1, 2, and 3.
Okay. 22 verse 1. Sometime later, God tested Abraham. He said to him, Abraham, here I am, he replied. Then God said, take your son, your only son, whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering on the mountain I will show you. Early the next morning, Abraham got up and loaded his donkey. He took with him 2 of his servants and his son Isaac. When he had cut enough wood for the burnt offering, he set out for the place God had told him about.
Okay. So now this son that God promised to Abraham is going to be a sacrifice.
Yeah.
So you have to think about, like, in Abraham's shoes, you might be thinking, oh, this man's crazy.
Mm.
Because that is something very hard to think about. If I asked you or somebody asked me about our children, it's like, would you sacrifice your children to God? What? No. No. But Abraham knew the covenant he had with God, and he knew that the covenant that he had was dependent upon Isaac.
Yeah.
So he knew, I have this covenant. You are God. You're not going to break the covenant. So maybe you're going to raise Isaac from the dead. Maybe you're going to stop me.
Yeah.
I don't know, but I'm going to obey you up until that point. And also, just to add, this was a normal practice of the day, was child sacrifice. This was happening everywhere. The Mesopotamian gods, all these other little g gods, which Baal, Ashtoreth, all of these gods demanded child sacrifice. So this is nothing new. This is not like Abraham for the first time is hearing of child sacrifice. But this is also a moment where God is proving to Abraham, I am not like those others. I actually care for you. I actually care for my creation.
Yeah.
And it says, now after these things, God tested the faith and commitment of Abraham. So then in verse 8, Abraham said, he's talking to Isaac, my son, God will provide for himself a lamb for the burnt offering. So the two walked on together. Obviously, we have foreshadowing of Jesus.
Yeah.
So they get up there. I'm going to paraphrase. Isaac gets on the altar. Abraham has the knife. He's about to kill Isaac. Angel of the Lord appears and says, stop. I know that you fear God with reverence and profound respect, since you have not withheld from me your son, your only son of promise. So now, reverse that. God shared with us. He did not withhold his son, his only son of promise.
Yeah.
So imagine if Abraham had not done this. Would we all just be doomed?
Probably.
We'd all just be like making animal sacrifices still and hoping that that we, got into heaven. But then he stops him. There's a ram caught in the thicket. They offer that together as father and son.
Yeah.
And it says, so Abraham named that place, the Lord will provide. On the mountain of the Lord, it will be seen and it will be provided. Again, foreshadowing of Jesus. Powerful moment here.
Yeah.
So as we bring this to a close, we have in chapter 23, you can read this one yourself, the death and burial of Sarah. But then in 24, we have a bride being chosen for Isaac. So Abraham gets his servant and he brings him over and he has him make him a promise. And he says, I will make you swear by the Lord, the God of heaven and the God of the earth, that you will not take a wife for my son from the daughters of the Canaanites among whom I live, but you will instead go to my former country, Mesopotamia, and to my relatives, and take a wife for my son Isaac, the heir of the covenant promise. The servant said to him, suppose the woman will not be willing to follow me back to this country. Should I take your son back to the country from which you came? Abraham said to him, see to it that you do not take my son back there. The Lord, the God of heaven, who took me from my father's house, from the land of my family, and from my birth, who spoke to me and swore to me, saying, to your descendants I will give this land. He will send his angel before you to guide you, and you will take a wife from there for my son and bring her here. So the servant makes this promise. He goes back, finds this girl named Rebecca. Turns out Rebecca's from one of the families that's friends with Abraham, there's like a distant relation
Yeah.
somehow. Brings her, she meets Isaac. And then we are in 24, verse 64.
Mm-hmm.
Rebekah also raised her eyes and looked, and when she saw Isaac, she dismounted from her camel. She said to the servant, "Who is that man there walking across the field to meet us? Who is he?"
Who's that?
Who's that?
Mm.
And the servant said, "He is my master Isaac." So she took a veil and covered herself, as was customary. The servant told Isaac everything that he had done. Then Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent, and he took Rebekah in marriage, and she became his wife, and he loved her. Good.
Oh,
Therefore,
how cute.
therefore Isaac was comforted after his mother's death.
How sweet.
So now we have the last chapter for this evening, which is 25. You want to read verse 1 and 2 from 25.
Okay. Abraham had taken another wife, whose name was Keturah. She bore him Zimran, Jokshan, Medan, Median, Ishbak, and Shua.
Great.
Jokshan was the father of Sheba and Dedan. The descendants of Dedan were the Asherites.
That's fine right there. So many names.
Plenty of names.
So he takes another wife, Keturah.
Yeah.
It's not said whether or not God told him to do this.
Yeah.
Or if he just did it.
Just did it.
But then we come down to verse 5. Now Abraham gave everything that he had to Isaac. But to the sons of his concubines, Hagar, who already left with her son, and Keturah, Abraham gave gifts while he was still living, and he sent them to the east country away from Isaac, his son of promise. The days of Abraham's life were 175 years. Then Abraham breathed his last, and he died at a good old age, an old man who was satisfied with life. I'm sure you were with all those wives and everything.
Sure.
And he was gathered to his people who had preceded him in death.
It's funny, but he was smart.
Yeah.
He was like, away from Isaac. You're not going to mess this up.
Yeah.
Away.
At least he did that. He was like, you know what? I could probably make a few more babies. You there. How'd you like to get married? How old are you? Doesn't matter.
So good.
Yeah. Also, this is just me being funny, but Sarah dies. He marries this other woman, and then all of a sudden out pops 6 more children. So it's like,
it's crazy.
Yeah, I wonder if he was like,
oh,
Sarah was the issue.
It's not me, it's you. Because I just had 6 more kids. Yeah. It's crazy.
So yeah, that is the life of Abraham. Obviously, there's more that you can read.
Of course.
But then right here, we get into Isaac's sons. And this is where we will it'll lead into the story that we will cover next with Jacob. But verse 21, Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife because she was unable to conceive children. And the Lord granted his prayer, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived twins. But the children struggled together within her, kicking and shoving one another. And she said, "If it is so that the Lord has heard our prayer, why then am I this way?" So she went to inquire of the Lord, praying for an answer. The Lord said to her, "The founders of 2 nations are in your womb, and the separation of 2 nations has begun in your body. The one people shall be stronger than the other, and the other shall serve the younger."
Damn.
Then it says, when her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her womb. The first that came out was reddish all over, like a hairy garment.
That's crazy. Like a hairy garment. Damn, okay.
I wonder if she was like, "Oh, here it comes. I've given birth to a monster." But they named him Esau, which means hairy. Afterwards, his brother came out, and his hand grasped Esau's heel. So he was named Jacob, one who grabs by the heel, supplanter. Isaac was 60 years old when Rebekah gave birth to them. When the boys grew up, Esau was an able and skilled hunter, a man of the outdoors. A hairy man of the outdoors. I like this guy. But Jacob was quiet and a peaceful man living in
My kind of
living
person.
in tents.
Mm.
Now Isaac loved and favored Esau because he
Rebecca.
enjoyed eating his game, as I would as well. But Rebekah loved and favored Jacob. Jacob had cooked reddish-brown lentil stew one day when Esau came in from the field and was famished. And Esau said to Jacob, "Please let me have a quick swallow of that red stuff there because I'm exhausted and famished." For that reason, Esau was also called Edom, red.
Yeah.
Jacob answered, "First, sell me your birthright, the rights of the firstborn." That whole exchange there is just so fascinating.
Crazy. Like, what was going through his head?
I don't know. It's like, hey, that looks like some nice soup. Can I have a bite? Sell me your birthright.
Okay.
All right, fine. Yeah. But yeah, so that's where the chapter ends is, of course, Esau sells the birthright for the stew. And now we have Esau and Jacob continuing this family line from Isaac in chapter 26.
Wonderful.
So, closing thoughts on all of that. It was a lot to get through.
Yes, it was. Closing thoughts. While we're still on Jacob and Esau, I'm gonna go to Rebecca favored Jacob and Isaac favored Esau. If we rewind a bit, when she sought out the Lord, the last thing God said was, "The older will serve the younger." So she knew what was up. She said, "I'm picking right. If I'm gonna pick from these two, I'm gonna pick the one that's gonna be served." So I guess that answers why Jacob was her favorite. And I'm not gonna lie, a man who loves to stay inside. It's my kind of person. Because why are you outside? But yes, Jacob and
he's
Esau.
Out there getting food.
Get your food from
what was
somewhere
Jacob
else.
doing? Reading a book?
Hey,
washing the dishes?
Game's a game. He made some lovely stew.
He did make some
And
stew,
I think Esau just never really comprehended the depth of a birthright. He was like, we're twins, but I'm first, but we're twins, so it doesn't really matter. Which is why I think he so willingly was like, yeah, give me that stew. Because if you really think about it, it's different if Esau was like 6 years older than Jacob.
Yeah.
And Jacob was like, yeah, give me your birthright. Then it would be a bit like, no, like, what are you talking about? But
you're 12, sit down.
Yeah. Exactly. But they were twins who came out on the same day. So you would think, oh yeah, the difference is not that much. The birthright is. But as we will see later on, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah. And I think there could have been a thing with, I think Esau was physically bigger.
Yeah, probably.
He had to have been
I
bigger.
would imagine.
So I think there was that to where it's like, oh, who's this like wimpy mama's boy? Like, yeah, you're going to take my birthright, whatever.
Sure.
And then secondly was Isaac favored him.
So he thought either ways.
Yeah.
I'm going to get it.
It's like, I'm either going to beat you up or I'll go to dad and I'll be like, yeah, he tried to, he gave me soup.
Yeah.
And you're still going to give me the birthright, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I think there was all of that playing into it where he just got too like big for his britches, so to speak.
Of course.
And then was also reliant upon
his own strength.
The favor with his father. But of course, we know what happens. Jacob is a tricky boy.
Yeah. He says small but mighty.
Yes.
Amen.
Oh, Victoria said Rebecca needed this marriage advice. Don't keep prophetic words about your kids
to yourself. True. Because I reckon Isaac probably would have chosen a different favorite if he knew.
Maybe. But I don't know. If my son starts bringing me jerky that he killed himself, I'd be like, you get some points. Trust me.
Brownie points.
When people say the fastest way to a man's heart is food,
yeah,
100%. The second fastest way is with an axe.
Oh. I don't think anyone in Scotland says that.
No, that's an old Scandinavian proverb.
I was gonna say. Well, fantastic.
Fun times. We went from Noah all the way to now we have
Jacob
Esau
and
and Jacob.
Esau.
Yeah. Fun
Excited
times.
for the next part because I actually really, really, really like the story of Jacob. Yeah.
Yeah.
In case you can't tell, he's my favorite.
Jacob is your favorite?
Of the two.
Oh, I see. That's actually a fun question. Who is your most favorite biblical character other than Jesus? Because Jesus is just, he's awesome. But
Yeah, of course, of course. My most favorite. See, this is a very tricky one because there's so many great people in the Bible. I don't want to be cliche and be like Esther or like Ruth. Of course, you're gonna say those two. No, no, no. But I quite like Moses. Moses was great, and I think the bond and the relationship Moses had with God was unmatched.
yeah.
And I admire that. I admire that so much that when he died, God personally took his body and put it somewhere that
Somewhere
no one-
secret.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like that kind of relationship with God
Yeah.
is what I aspire for. God,
So
take
dope.
me somewhere no one will find me.
I have two favorite deaths.
Oh,
Number one is going out the way Samson went out.
mhm.
What a way to go.
True. True.
But then second is Moses. Because
yeah,
exactly. God taking your body
is
personally and putting it
amazing.
somewhere special.
Yeah.
So cool.
Or like Elijah, who just never died. Chariots
flaming
of fire.
chariot. That's number 3.
Yep.
What I would love is to knock down a whole building, destroy all my enemies inside,
Mhm.
walk outside, get on a flaming chariot,
And then just
ride off into heaven.
it's crazy. God
Oh,
is
yeah.
good for real. But yeah.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Well, there you have it. Thank you for all of those who have stuck around with us. If you're listening to this later, we hope that you will go back and read what we went through. Because anytime that you read the Bible and you read something else, the Holy Spirit reveals something new to you each time. So
Amen.
we'll quickly close with a prayer for
Yeah.
everyone watching, that their hunger for the Word of God would grow.
Mhm.
I'll let you pray that, and then
Okay.
we'll
Of
get
course.
out of here.
Okay. Dear Heavenly Father, we want to say thank you for this moment that we've had. We are so, so, so grateful for the opportunity to dive into your word and to just receive from you in this moment. Father, Lord, I thank you for everyone who's been watching. I pray they've been blessed, and I pray for the opportunity to apply what we've learned into our lives, to seek you out and to find favor in your sight. Lord God, I also pray for a hunger and thirst for your word like no other. And Father, Lord God, show us the things that we've not been able to see when we overlook parts of the Bible. Continue to be there for us every step of the way. Guide our choices, our steps. And we thank you, God, because we know you hear our prayers and you answer them. In Jesus' name we've prayed. Amen.
Amen. All righty. Goodbye, Instagram.
Bye.
And goodbye, YouTube.
Bye.